Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you 5 essential watercolor techniques. It's definitely a medium that you want to practice a little bit to get to have some of these effects show up really nice in your painting. Alright, so let's get started. The materials you're going to need today are a pan of watercolors, and I'm going to show you how to get these to really work nicely for you. And you're going to have some nice tipped brushes, make sure your tip isn't broken, some scrap paper definitely, paper towel, a nice bucket of water, and if you want to try some salt, I got 2 different types of salt. I got a very big grain salt, and I have the fine table salt. So, and you also need some nice watercolor paper to work on. First thing I want to do is make sure that my watercolors are pretty clean. So I'm going to take a paper towel and just dip it in my water a little bit. And if your pan has a little bit of color on top of, so this orange had some other color in it, all you have to do is that. Just take a paper towel and get it off and clean it. So this really should be done before you put it away, although that doesn't always happen. So if you do have a little bit in there, just take your paper towel and clean it. Also, you can clean your palette on the side by just wiping that down. And everybody might have different palettes, but these plastic ones are really, really nice because they clean up real easy. And I'm going to keep that color. I like to kind of keep the ones that are on there already sometimes for mixing. All right, so our first technique is a wash technique. So wash technique is going to be used for lots of different things, and I recommend this for any kind of background, for water, skies, things like that, where you want it continuous. You can stain inside of it, but let's learn how to use this wash technique. First thing you're going to do is take some water on your brush. So totally load your brush up with water. And you might want to start with some paint, so let's get some paint started. If you're using these pans, I'm just going to put a little bit of water in the colors that I'm using just to get it so that it starts to get a little more mushy, because the paint in here is made so that it can travel, and it's not, it's going to be harder in the pan before you start to put water in it. So remember, the main concept of watercolor painting is the water. Okay, I'm going to put down a bunch of water on my paper, and you notice I'm holding my brush back. I don't want to hold it like a pencil where I'm kind of putting this very harshly on my paper. I'm not really rubbing my paper too much. All right, now I'm just going to take some color on the tip of my brush, and when I use my color from my pan like this, I'm kind of swirling my brush a little bit, okay? And I just want it on the tip of my brush. So then you can just touch, and your paint should spread out like this, okay? Depends how much water you're actually using. And if you notice, the paint only goes into the areas where I have water, and it stops at a pretty harsh line. So there is something that we can do about that. If you don't have time to paint the whole thing, or if you don't want a harsh line there, there's lots of things that you can do, but one thing that you can do is blot. So this is a wash technique. Let the paint flow. I'm just going to touch another color in there, because you can do, any kind of blended colors in it, and it will blend by itself. So let the paint just go how it wants to go. All right, and you can move it around however you want. So if I took my paper and just kind of moved my paper a little bit, if you can see, it's avoiding those spots where I didn't touch water. And it's just staying within the areas where I have the water. All right, now you can let that just dry like this, and it will dry exactly how it is on the paper. Or you can use your paper towel and you can blot. You can like literally suck up the paint, where I take a little paper towel and use it like it's a little mop, and I can suck the paint right up like that. You can see what we're doing here. And this will give you a nice smooth background. So the next thing that I think is an essential watercolor technique is literally taking paper towel and blotting. So you can get texture in it by just crunching your paper towel, or you can just, you know, leave your paper towel pretty flat. So what I'm going to do is I want this area right here I want it to be nice and smooth. Like I want it to go from a darker area to a lighter area. I'm going to take my paper towel and go straight up and down. Make sure that you are going straight up and down. You're not rubbing, like never scrub your paper or rub it back and forth. You got to be careful. This is like a delicate, it's actually a pretty hefty paper. Watercolor paper is pretty good, but you know, you can't really scrub and rub on it. All right, so I'm going to have that going from like a real nice, you know, a darker area to a lighter area, and I suggest doing this with a little water at the end of it if you're going to continue on painting at a different time. So if you want that to keep flowing into an area and the next time you want it to look similar, you gotta keep an edge of water and a very light edge, or else it will stain. And staining is another really interesting technique that you can only get from watercolor. So here we go. That's a nice light transition. Okay, so that one is our wash technique. Now we're going to try the grated wash technique. So we did the blotting with a paper towel, and we're going to do the grated wash technique. So the next one, we're actually starting on dry paper. The grated wash technique, we're going to have a brush that is wet, but not sopping wet. So we don't want tons of water on it. And I just take my paper towel and I touch this part of my brush rather than the top, and I kind of suck the water out of my brush a little bit. And I'm going to take my paint, and I'll take this purple, we'll do a purple grated wash, and I'm going to take my paint that is already wet, and I'm going to keep it on the tip of my brush. This is great for the edge of like a, I don't know, the edge of something. So if you just put your paint right against the edge of a line, whatever you're drawing, okay, then you quickly wash off your brush. In your water, wash, wash, wash. Now you want water only on your brush. Okay, and you're going to take right away. So you can't do a lot of this at once. Right away, you're going to drag. So you're going to take the edge of that line and you are going to drag it down. So this makes it go from a dark value of that color to a lighter value gradually. That's why it's called a graded wash. And another technique I'm going to do within this is I'm going to reserve whites. With watercolor, you cannot get whites back. So one way that you can do it is to reserve your whites. And there's where you see those little specks of white there. All right, so this is a nice graded wash. Now I can use my paper towel a little bit to get this even lighter towards the end. And we can do a really, really graded wash. So I'm just taking water again and dragging down some of that paint that's very light already, and I can continue. Really great watercolor technique. Definitely use it. So this is on dry paper, remember. So a little different than the wash technique. Okay, so that's graded wash. Now, we're going to go to, we reserved some whites in that last one. Reserving whites can be also on a layered surface. If you see on this one, I had the turquoise color in the background and the purple on top, and I did reserve some whites, which is the color underneath. It's the underpainting. But that will help you to develop more depth in your painting. Okay, the next one is dry brush. And I really love dry brush when it's layered on top of a background. And I actually think you should only use it when it's on top of a background. So I'm going to do a little bit on top of this. Dry brush, you're literally using dry on dry. So you have to dry your brush, and you have to have it on a dry painted area already. So if I want to enhance this little area here, I'm going to take some of my paint on the tip of my brush, and you don't want the paint too wet either. This is really great for grasses and things like that. If you're just going to, you know, have some grasses, tall grasses on top of something, if you're layering, you're going to be able to see that color in the background that's already there. All right, so this is like using the paint actually in a different way. It can be really beautiful when it's used properly, so just make sure you're not just using dry brush on the dry paper and then there's nothing behind it. If you're going to want some sort of background around it, make sure that it's painted first. Okay, so I can dry brush any of this and get some different effects. And I can leave it just like this, or I can basically do a graded wash with it. So, you know, this is really pretty. It almost looks like the fin of a fish or something like that. You can see some of those areas that are the color that's underneath it, or the paper underneath it. I'm just going to do a little doodling in here. And like I said, you can kind of do a graded wash with this. So I'm going to wash off my brush again. Since this is a small surface, I'm going to use a small little area. I'm going to use my brush with a little bit of water on it. And then I'm just going to paint the edge out a little bit. Okay, and do some of my grading on there. But this is for details, things like that. Should not be used first, like I said. It should be used after you have some paint down already. And then however your details are going to be. And you can keep layering around this. So dry brush is just a really great technique for, you know, adding a little detail, things like that. The next thing we can try is just doing a little salt. And when you're doing salt, I have some large grains of salt. I also have some table salt, just to show you the difference. And looking at this example, you can see that it definitely is different. The large grains of salt will suck up a portion of your paint around it. And that's what it does. It kind of like acts like a little sponge. So these you have to put where you want them. These little fine grains of salt, they'll give you almost like these little dots. So it's kind of, you know, it's neat for certain areas. And I just wouldn't use it all over my painting. I would use it in certain little spots. I'm going to do a watercolor painting for you in a different video. If you want to see how I use all these things together, please make sure you watch the links I attached to this video of some of the paintings I included. You'll be able to see how I use all of these different techniques together. So this is just used on a surface that you have painted and that's still wet. So I'm going to go back to where I did my wash in the beginning because it's still wet. I'll add a little bit more to it. So wash is just where you're putting down some water. And I'm going to add some paint on top of that. Okay, remember it only flows where it's wet. It's not going to go anywhere else unless you really, really move your paper. Okay, I've got that area there, and I'll show you. I would use these sparingly. So these are the big grains of salt, and immediately you'll start to see like how it kind of sucks up some of the water, and the salt grains actually turn the color of the paint that's around it. So you'll see that these will turn blue and possibly purple over there. So those are my large grains of salt, and this is the small grains of salt. I would just kind of, like I said, make sure you're using this kind of sparingly in where you want it. So that's my small grain of salt, okay? And I'm gonna leave that on there until this fully dries. And when it fully dries, you literally have to wipe off your salt, okay? And you know, this you gotta try. Like I said, it's best to practice watercolor first on some other paper, you know, use some scrap paper and just try it. Try and see these things and see what it looks like. A couple other fun ones that actually are worth mentioning are drip movement and splatter technique. So these techniques are more for something a little more loose, and it's really fun. Drip movement, all you have to do is put a line of water. So if you want it along an edge of something, and wherever you want it to drip, you start a little tributary. I'm going to start one there. You'll see I'll make 3. I'm starting a little tributary there and starting one there. Okay, now I'm going to put in my paint, and I did red before, so let's use some of this. I'm going to put in my paint. Okay, and now I will pick this up and move my paper, and you're gonna see like where you move, when you move your paper, okay, however you want that to drip, that's only gonna drip in those areas. So if I want it to have a long drip, short drip, okay, however, if you want it to drip right off the page, that's what you'll get, okay? So it's that type of thing. And you're really kind of, you are controlling where the drips are. So you can do this different ways where you actually just kind of splatter like that. You tap your brush and you get these little splatters of paint like that. Or, you know, you can use both of them together. These are really nice techniques to kind of just build up. The splattering, this one is fun too. If you have a loose painting again, I'm going to just put some water down. I'll do another one like over with this. Okay, and then there we go. I want a good amount of water down for that. And let's use some of this color. All right, and then you can just blow on it. Okay, and move your paper in the direction of how you want it to go. So this type of thing is a really cool technique as well. Now the staining with water, you'd have to use that on an area that's already dry. So this is a stained area right here. And with water, if I have a surface that I painted yesterday or whatever, I am going to take some water and I can just tap some water in areas and just let it drip. Just let it fall. And this will form, that little bubble will form this little stain around it. So that's what I've already done with these. Okay, so it's actually a really cool thing to do for certain backgrounds and in certain objects that you're doing. You might want some sort of like staining from this. You're using watercolor, so why not do something interesting? All right, so those are our main watercolor techniques that are great for anybody to use and practice. Use it all together or use a few of them together at different times. Remember to always have your scrap paper next to you, because you really don't know when you're painting what color is on your brush. So I don't know how deep this blue is on my brush right now until I use my scrap paper, okay? And you know, of course you could always try to see, like if it's a little scrap of the paper that you're using, how the paper actually reacts and works with the water, because different types of paper will react differently with your water. Okay? Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.